So
Yes.
take it away.
All right. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. And I'm going to, I think it would be best to see if I can share this agenda. So I just want to start off with sharing with everyone two of the links, these two survey links. I just wanted to share, we didn't make everyone on this call collaborators because we're still modifying the questions, but I do want to make sure the committee can see them this evening. And of course, anyone who might be watching from home, they can get an idea of the type of survey questions we are thinking about pushing out to the community. So I'll just start off with, I'd love if we can spend a few minutes just talking about the citywide PTO meeting as a debrief. But mostly this evening, Courtney, Ann, and I would like to talk about the ESSA funds that have been made available for the district and districts across the state of Connecticut. Our allocation is a little bit over $10 million. And we have had some initial discussions within the district on, in terms of planning for those monies. But there is some guidance that comes from the state that suggests that we should also, and we certainly supporters of this idea, making sure we have a plan in place to also engage our staff, engage our parents and families in the greater community, to get also additional feedback on how these monies can be used to help support and help raise student outcomes in the community, support the social emotional development and support for our students and staff, and then also provide supports for family to help support student outcomes at home, and then last but not least, any efforts that could be continued to make sure all of our kids and families are connected. And I'll go over some of that guidance in more detail throughout the agenda. In the next area, there are some community engagement materials I wanted to share with this committee. The community engagement materials are not necessarily ESSER specific. We had talked about having some engagement sessions for the community, but this evening is about ESSER. So we have a community invitation here, and we want to review that with you. And this is an invitation to join the district in the conversation about ESSER funds. We will review with them the guidance that you'll see momentarily. But I also wanted to revisit the one pager with you as part of the citywide PTO to see if there's any adjustments you wanted us to make. And then last but not least, there was also a social media graphic that had been developed and talked about. Kate had led that discussion in our previous meeting, and just wanted to see where we were with that and see if there any adjustments needed to be made to that. And then kind of rounding out the agenda, the city of Danbury, and just kind of revisit that budget timeline and just kind of make sure we're all aligned and making sure we're landing on whatever date has been assigned. I don't think the city has identified one yet. And then just talk about our collective next steps. But for the most part, this is about the ESSER guidance. I'm hoping we can spend the majority of our time on that. But it would be great if we can start with number 2 and talk about citywide PTO debrief. And, as we continue to, this is before ESSER, as we continue this idea of engagement sessions with different stakeholder groups. Since we did get our first engagement session out of the way, just curious about what we can do to improve, any feedback this committee may have heard that would be helpful with Courtney, Ann, and I, and of course, Dr. Sal, as we engage these community groups moving forward. Okay, I'm sorry, that was an invitation.
Sounds good, Kevin. Do you want to talk about the citywide PTO and sort of, give us a sense of, we talked a little bit about this on Thursday.
Yes.
So what else would you like to address this evening?
So I think for me and for Courtney and Ann and I, and I guess all of us, we will start to calendar as we get commitments from those different constituency groups, start to calendar engagement sessions. And so if there is any concrete adjustments we need to make, we're happy to make those adjustments. if there's anything we can do better, we're certainly open to that, and see if there's a conversation we wanted to have. If not, I can certainly move on to the next one.
I mean, I think the one pager is really in very good shape, and I like the use of it in terms of the presentation. I don't know if other folks have a similar opinion, but one thing that Mr. Ginelli brought up last meeting was that we are going to need some numbers behind some of this. I do think that piece is missing. I don't want to necessarily put that into the one pager because I think that that's a really good standalone piece, but I think it would be helpful for people to be able to see some of the breakdown that occurs in that, like the 4-page piece, Courtney, that you put together. Yeah. Just provides the kind of detail and especially the numbers that folks may be looking for. And we had a conversation as well about, some of the other numbers that I think would be helpful to give to people, which is a sense of what it's going to do to their taxes to do different things. So for example, Courtney, you had at one point worked up a number that was relative to home value and what it would look like for, an increase in taxes for a certain home value. But we also talked about the idea of, okay, if we're adding, X number of teachers to our roster, our employee roster, what would that look like in terms of a tax increase? If we were to add, 5 guidance counselors, what would that look like in terms of a tax increase to sort of help people understand what exactly they're getting for the money that they would be spending?
Yeah, that's good, Kate, because Kevin, Kate and I spoke, and I've also spoken with Al Russo about this before as well. And I think that's a good way to frame it, because if we said, like when I did the brief slide that I shared earlier, it was assuming we needed the full 14 million. That the city would have to undertake wouldn't necessarily be the full 18 million, because there's already an assumption of a certain amount within the existing budget. So we said maybe to make it more palatable to people, that I could break it out and say, okay, so if we were going to buy 10 teachers, this is what it would mean in a tax, change, 10 additional new teachers, for example. And then also just putting it in terms of, like, I gave what it would be for someone with a property value of 200K, but we can put that more in like the median house, so I don't know what the median is, but it's probably more than 200K.
Or even a few different levels, a few different tiers of house values would be helpful, I think.
Yeah. I've seen districts where I kind of did a little bit of research, Kate, and like even on their school, website, they actually have a tool where you can input your tax bill and then show how much of that goes towards your education. I don't know what the tool is that they're using, but I thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah, I love that idea, actually.
Yeah. Find out, but I can get the tax information, and the 4-pager is the document that Anne had put together with the sort of template, which maybe I'll work with Rich. Rich and I are meeting tomorrow about finance, so maybe I can work with him about, what information to put into that 4-pager that still gets to the numbers, but it's palatable and accessible.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Rich, I hope that's okay with you. Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm muted. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Good night.
Yeah, and I like that idea because it continues the idea of, kind of digesting the budget in small bites, and people can understand the impact. And so translating it in the way we're talking about what you're getting for your money, what it means for additional taxes, I think people will really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And helping to form any decision or action that they might take.
Yeah. Rich, did you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I'm still beating a dead horse, and I'd like to ask or have somebody, Kate, perhaps you, because you're chair, is to ask the fellow who runs the citywide PTO, Tim. I think it's Tim. I'm not sure if it's last name, as to what his reaction or what the members of a citywide, what their opinion was of the response to the presentation, basically the interest, Basically, I'd like to know that. My observation was, it was sort of accepted as half-hearted. Um, and maybe a question to him could be, what could we do to stimulate more interest in what we're doing? I
Yeah.
mean,
Good question.
this, the amount of time and effort on everybody's part, and Kevin's and Courtney's and the people on the committee, it is tremendous. And I still feel we're beating a dead horse if the people that we're out there advocating for don't understand or just don't have the time to listen to us. And if that's the case, then how could we ask them, or not how could we ask them, can we ask them what we can do to reach them? And maybe to make it simpler. We've been down this road for years, and every year our presentation gets much better, but it's like a rehearsal for ourselves, and the audience that we're looking to give it to continues to be the same. And just one point, I finished the meeting tonight with a PTO meeting at Pembroke, which I'm liaison for, and their membership is the same. They had 13 people on there, and maybe 5 of them were teachers and the rest were some parents, but the parents were the same parents that I've been accustomed to seeing for years. So they also said that their problem of engaging more people to join has been tough, but there was one new parent, I should say. And she came on and said that she'd like to learn more about what's going on, except she doesn't know where to get the information. And she'd like to be aware as to what's important.
Rich, I think you cut out there. Well, hopefully Rich will come back online, but to address that point, we did have a conversation, a follow-up conversation. Amy and I spoke with the citywide leadership, and they're actually going to be conducting an internal feedback opportunity on that presentation, and they were hoping to turn that information over to us so that we could use it to improve our presentation going forward. I think Amy, had a more in-depth conversation with Tim, to get his immediate response. And, as she shared, part of the frustration here is that they're also struggling to figure out how to engage parents on things that are not specific to their own children. So I think that's part of in our messaging. I think that's part of what we have to just consider is that if we make this, if we express things in a way that speaks to the individual students, the student level experience, whether that's, talking about guidance counselors steering the path for high schoolers, as they're preparing for what's going to happen after graduation, or talking about, kids who are experiencing interruptions in their learning because of COVID and being on distance learning, whatever those avenues are, and talking about the supports as they relate to those obstacles that the kids are facing in school, I think that's likelier to resonate.
So, and I think Ann is still here. And,
I am.
And tonight is probably not a good time to talk about this in detail, but there are some thoughts. We've talked to Sal and Dr. Sal, and Ann has been leading this effort, and we're really close to bringing in a social media platform that frankly I think will really help with the exchange of information to our community, and will allow us to continue to push out messages. And so, we're really close to onboarding, purchasing and onboarding that process. And, soon there'll be a rollout for professional development, training the staff, et cetera. but by next year, perhaps maybe not September, the first day, but we will be able to use this social media and be able to, have even more contact with our parents and families. I think we'll have an opportunity to continue to inform them and, kind of reinforce and continue to educate. In this way, we're not, relying on these one-time deals, one-time efforts to push out information. So hopefully that will also help us in the near future.
It will. If I could just add to that, I just came off of, jeepers, talk about light. I just came off of another city meeting or meeting here in the city, and they were talking about accessibility of information and ease to be able to find things. And so we are also at the same time working on our Danbury Public School website to make that information easier to be able to find. But I think in the meantime, we have some ability to be able to get the messages out to groups and to folks in Danbury, but it was really emphasized the accessibility of information and being able to find it easily was something that many of the members of the community that were on the call were not finding that was easy to do in Danbury. Yeah.
There's a lot of content on that main webpage.
There is.
Yeah.
And I find even as a parent, just meeting me where I am, so I know, to Anne's point, like if we can figure out a way to market, simplify, be consistent, and get it out there in social media, it's helpful. It'll be helpful for our parents because it is hard today. People have jobs, they're oversubscribed, in their commitments, and so to the extent we can meet them where they are, it'll probably be helpful.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go for it. Amy.
I just want to add too that I don't know if Richard's still on. Richard?
I think we
he
lost him
lost
again,
service.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Oh, he lost service. Well, I know he's really championed this effort for a long time. I mean, being head of community relations, I think as long as I was on the board, he was. And, I think we're getting closer. We're getting closer to having what the parents were looking for. And I don't know if it was Kate, that when we spoke to them, one of the last times we talked was, parents are just still kind of reeling from getting back to quotes normal this year. And, that the big concern, I guess, one of the big concerns, of course, was their kids' schedules, and they were going to be changing from hybrid to, in person. And so, I think we still have to keep that in mind, that that's what's going on this year. And if we just keep on kind of honing this, sounds like we are. It's like we're zeroing in on what the parents really are looking for. It's just a process. And I think that we have to keep on going and realizing that this is just, again, another year of a lot of parents and teachers and being overwhelmed, and it'll be different once we get back to some sort of normalcy.
That's a good point.
We needed that perspective, Amy. Thank you.
Yeah. And I wonder if there's a way we can extend that welcoming school model to a digital platform, or in a way that, markets us to, meet people in a way that is part of the district. Because I know they interact with their principals regularly, but if we can pull the principals in and think of the community as a whole, ways that we can access each other digitally, not just in the little red schoolhouse, might be helpful.
So Kate, if you're okay, I'd like to move on to the ESSER guidance. And I think if I heard you correctly, and I do have some notes here about making sure we find a way to incorporate the impacts on the taxes and home value, help to share with our families and community, and inform them of what they will be getting for their value and for their investment. And I heard Mr. Janelli's point, what can we do to stimulate more interest in the budget, and see if we can't, elicit some feedback from Tim on behalf of the citywide PTO. And we certainly can do that. So we'll make those adjustments and, get that additional feedback to inform that process.
Yeah, and I'll follow up with Tim in the next day or two, and just see if he was able to reach out to the folks that were on that call.
Okay, great. And so I will go to number 3. And so as part of the ESSER funds, we have some guidance we wanted to share with the committee this evening. We wanted to also share some surveys, some draft surveys, some for staff, and then some also for our parents and families in the community, and just kind of talk about an overall community engagement plan. You'll see down here in 4C, there's a community invitation. So we wanted to share you that draft as well. And I think you'll have a better understanding of why we're engaging in this process, and on our opportunity to educate the community on these funds. So let me just hit this link.
Okay.
I believe the PowerPoint is it's not that long, so 12 pages. And it's a
Kevin, can I just
relatively quick read. Yes.
say one thing? So just to be clear, this is ESSER 2. ESSER 1, what we refer to as the CARES Act funding, is 2.5. That money is not, this is ESSER 2, it's in addition to that. Sorry, just to be clear.
Yeah, thank you, Courtney.
Okay.
Thank you, Courtney. And so this is the 10.1 million that we talked about briefly in our last meeting, but we did not speak to in much detail. And so the analogy that I used when talking about insurance, and there are certainly some restrictions on how those monies can be used, and we'll have an opportunity to see how those funds are to be distributed. So it might be just easiest to do this way. And so the state has, they have some priorities for these monies, starting with, and it's really all about providing equity and access to a high quality education for all children. And Courtney, would you mind starting off with the timeline?
Oh, sure. So they released the LEA allocation. So we received an allocation of 10.1 million. It was funded along the Title I allocation methodology. And the week of February 22nd, well, it didn't actually happen the week of February 22nd. It happened last Friday.
Right, it happened last week.
So I said released an online application through the e-grant system. It requires a needs assessment, articulation of steps to be taken to mitigate gaps, description of the intended plan for resource. And then CSDE will give us, they expect us to update, just like we do with Alliance, on the plan implementation. The grant period for ESSER 1, what we call CARES Act funding, or the first part that you're familiar with, was extended. So the grant period ends September 30th, 2022. And ESSER 2 and culminates in 2023. And you might have heard of a new federal allocation as part of the stimulus package. I'll just mention it. It's not here on this slide, but it's anticipated if the House passes what the Senate passed, they could make modifications, but what the Senate passed along the legislative rules, Danbury could expect about $25 million if it comes to fruition as the Senate again, go through the House, more information soon. But I just wanted to make you all aware of that.
Right. Thank you, Courtney. And so just bringing this back to the second bullet here, application will require a needs assessment and articulation of steps to be taken to mitigate for mitigation, description of an intended plan. Well, this needs assessment in this plan that we're going to submit on behalf of the district is going to be informed by feedback from our administrators, feedback from our staff, and feedback from our parents, families, and community. And so that's part of the reason why we are engaging our community in this process.
Kevin,
Courtney, can I ask?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kate.
I just was wondering, can you remind me what the ESSER 1 funds were?
Yeah, CARES Act money, 2.6 million, and that went towards specific priorities also, which was PPE, learning loss. I can get you some specifics,
right.
But it funded some student support specialists. It funded some purchase of to roll out for students to be able to engage remotely and do assessments.
To help feed families during the school close down, feed students during the school close down.
Thanks.
Yeah.
That jogged my memory. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And I was going to
continue to pay staff during the close down.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I on this Sr2 funding timeline, just it's going to be germane when Kevin gets to the next part. Essentially, there's a quick turnaround time for us, so they'd like it to be returned within a month of when they opened the application. There's a little flexibility there, but we're planning out as though early April we've got to have our application in. So, and Kevin and I worked through something with Cabinet, which is a timeline, and Kevin's going to go through the rest of the presentation that achieves sort of all the goals of this application that the state's asking us to do, because this application is a bit for the funding is a bit more involved and than our previous CARES, which was, you know, they needed to get the money out quickly, and so we were able to do that a little bit more quickly with less information.
Right. So here are the 4+1 priorities for the district, and so and I don't think anyone is going to be surprised by the first four, and quite frankly, I think the last one is a bonus. Academic supports, learning loss, learning acceleration and recovery for our students. Family and community connections, and so you know, we've already talked about some potential investments with our social media platform. School safety and social emotional well-being, right? And so we want to continue to support the social emotional. You know, we want to continue to support not only our students but our staff, in support of the whole student in our schools. Remote learning, staff development, and a digital divide. And so continue to make sure all of our kids are connected. And then where they are not connected, making sure we have resources in place to make sure that our kids can get connected. And then last but not least, school facility repairs and improvements, which, you know, this could be an opportunity for us to address, you know, some kind of long-term issues in the district. We might be able to address some with these monies. So we're, you know, we're looking forward to all of these opportunities.
Can we
So
just can we
Sure.
just clarify one thing? And maybe you're going to get into this, Kevin, so I apologize if I'm getting ahead here. But in terms of what we're talking about programming. We're not talking about staffing.
Combination, Kate. And when you
Okay.
say staffing, and so I think the point you're getting at, some of these things, some of ESSA2, some of the things that we perhaps have targeted for our budget could be eligible in ESSA2. So some of those things are eligible, and maybe when we get to the end, Courtney can, you know, discuss some of those things, perhaps not in too much detail because we're still trying to understand what those things are, but there are some things that could be eligible in ESSA2. That's what we have learned in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah,
So
you just have to weigh, and this will be part of the conversation we have with the board, but weigh the risk for the future.
Right.
But now that we're getting this additional funds, it's like a 5-year timeline. So, you know, it's a little bit, anyway, yes, personnel is eligible to be supported through the ESSA2.
Right. And so as you might imagine, we've already begun discussions on how to address learning loss. And so, you know, for a lot of our families, this could mean, you know, extending our invitations to summer school. This could mean, you know, additional supports after school for students to help our students. You know, this could mean different programming support virtually for students at home. So, you know, we're exploring all ways, you know, we can help students who have been severely impacted, you know, by the pandemic. Also for opportunities for kids to continue to accelerate their learning. You know, we want to address recovery, we want to mitigate learning loss as much as possible. And then of course we have students who, you know, even more vulnerable than others. So, you know, our students with, you know, students with disabilities that have an IEP, and English language learners, you know, we want to, and any of our disengaged youth, you know, any of those barriers that they might have to remote learning, we want to make sure is mitigated through this process and leverage these resources to help, you know, to help all of those students. So engaging families and the community, provide parents and guardians with the skills to support their children's academic endeavors or their, you know, academic goals. You know, I love the fact that, you know, even in the state's guidance, they talked about districts engaging the community in the family academy programs, right? And in these environments, we could provide parents and guardians with the skills to support their children's academic, you know, endeavors at home, right? And so including those skills necessary to support technology use in the home. And so, you know, Anne did her best, our coaches did their best, our district, we all did our best to try to support families in this transition but it would be amazing to have the resources to have academies to support our families across the district in a more systemic way. And these resources could help in that work. School safety and social emotional well-being of the whole student and our school staff. And so, we know we're in unprecedented times right now. And so, helping to address the social emotional health concerns and partnering with, our public health safety, public, our social emotional centers, and partnering with those groups to help making sure we meet the needs of all of our kids. There are certainly opportunities for mental health services to be delivered in person or remote, and making sure we're tapping into all of those supports to meet the needs of our kids in these unprecedented times. And of course, you've also heard from the district, around hiring hiring and recruiting and hiring more staff to help support, for guidance counselors, social workers, et cetera. And so there is also some opportunities in those areas to help in this effort. And then the safety piece, school safety, is also included in here. So resources could also be allocated to support the physical health and safety of our students, and ensuring that we continue to have the PPE equipment that we need across the district, and ensuring that we have the cleaning supplies that we need across the district, and making sure we continue to be outfitted with the necessary PPE equipment to keep our building and our people safe. And so remote learning, staff development, and a digital divide, maintain or upgrade access to technology and connectivity for the long term. And I really think we need to be forward thinking right now as part of this work. Certainly we did enough to get through the pandemic. But I think, part of the conversations we need to have, if we're going to be a one-to-one district, if we're going to have all of our kids walking around with laptops, there's going to be an increased demand on our infrastructure. And I think we need to do an assessment probably to make sure we can meet the needs of all of our kids, whether they're at home or whether they're in school. And I think an assessment is going to be needed really soon. And so some of the resources that should be allocated, you can see up here, we've identified a few. Provide assistance and training for our families, talk about that a little bit earlier. Increase professional development for staff to continue to develop their skills to provide remote learning. And I open with maintaining and upgrading technology for the long term.
Kevin, could the assessment of our existing system fall under a reimbursement for this?
I don't know. Courtney, any thoughts on that one?
Assessment of our current network technology or software?
I'm thinking more network, like the network itself, like the incoming signal and the disbursement of that signal, and the connection of all those. You know what I mean? Like the hardware itself. Sorry.
My signal's bad as you're saying that, because I'm hearing you in and out. Yeah, we do believe it is eligible, and it's a big upgrade that we're about to need for the whole overall infrastructure. So I think it's like $395K that we put forward in the budget. I believe it'll be eligible for under ESSER. Our challenge there is that you have an ongoing maintenance cost. We're just going to have to be mindful, of that ongoing maintenance cost. Being funded with a grant, is an operational need. So that's that conversation. But yes, upgrading the Wi-Fi where we need to upgrade the Wi-Fi and putting the right servers in place and a network maintenance contract in place is eligible. At least the hardware portion of those pieces are eligible.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
And then not terribly different from what the last slide, but school facility repairs and improvements to reduce the risk of virus transmission and exposure to environmental health hazards. And this one could be a big one for us. And so I think another, some type of inspection or assessment would be necessary. This could be some opportunities to upgrade, continue to upgrade our infrastructure. And so, all of these things will be part of the considerations moving forward. And so in here, in this next slide, just provides kind of a list of activities or eligible activities under ESSER. So I just wanted to share this. And again, this is just kind of repeat of some Some of the items we've already talked about, but improving coordination with the district to improving coordination to respond, right, and prevent the response to coronavirus. Planning for and coordination between schools and families during long-term closures. So, we were, unfortunately, if we were to have another event like we did last time, make sure we're ready to make sure we can continue to make sure our kids are fed during any time of long-term closure, making sure we can still provide access for families to high-quality online learning, like we did during the closure this time. But again, as we continue to have more and more kids connected, there's likely to be more and more demands on the system, so we want to make sure we're ready for it. Provide principals and other school leaders with the resources necessary they need to address the needs in their individual schools. This was mentioned in the previous slide about facility repairs and improvements to enable operation of schools to reduce the risk of virus transmission. Of course, address the learning loss and whether it's programming or staffing to help support all of our students. Provide mental health services and supports, and this could be staffing, this could be programming, this could be professional development for staff. So there are a lot of different directions we can go in under that one. Planning and implementing activities related to summer learning, supplemental after-school programs, and addressing the needs of low-income students, students with disabilities, English language learners. And so this is, again, going back to the academic learning loss and making sure we're addressing those areas. And other activities that are necessary to maintain operations and continuity of services and continuing to employ existing staff. And so these are just some of the activities that are eligible under ESSER. And so, when our community is thinking about the 10.1, certainly there are guidelines, but there, as you can see, there are some flexibilities that could be part of the consideration. So what's next for us? We will be submitting an application soon. We will be submitting an application soon. Courtney mentioned that earlier, and that will be in about a month from now, in early April. As part of this application process, we will be engaging stakeholders as part of our process to help inform the submission of that application. And frankly, we are looking forward to that. As part of that process, we will have a needs assessment. All of this will, help inform how we can address students' needs district-wide and improve student outcomes. We also understand that, as part of this process, we want to make sure we're engaging community, but we also want to engage all of our bargaining units as part of this process. And we will, right? Because we are partners in this work. And then last but not least, review the current funding streams to ensure any remaining balances are used to support current needs in accordance with our approved applications. And so that also will be part of the process moving forward. Courtney, did you need to provide any clarification on this last slide before I close out?
One little bit. So something that Rich has asked for and that I'd like to ask his opinion about doing in a finance committee would be, we have CRF, Coronavirus Relief Funds, we have CARES Act 1, we have CARES Act 2, and now we have this new federal stimulus money coming. So just to be really clear for either a workshop or how we talk to the board about it, I just want everybody to know, what each of those funding streams is supporting, and then what our process is for this application. So as Kevin mentioned, there's a assessment tool that we have to use and we are using per the state guidance to develop our plan for the $10 million. That's just kicked off. So we've identified sort of stakeholders to lead each of the target areas. So remote learning, learning loss, family engagement, social emotional, and they have to engage stakeholders and then identify what rubric they're going to be using to measure the effectiveness. So demographic information, so qualitative, quantitative information to align it with our, and then also align it with our mission and our SMART goals, so our strategic plan. And so it's involved and already, from the academic side, CARES led some teams that have identified possible uses of the CARES Act money, and then Cabinet's going to come together and prioritize those and then talk to the board about it. So we've got a short time frame and there is a rubric for which we'd assess it. And I just want the board to be aware and the community relations group to be aware that, there's 4 basic funding streams. related to coronavirus relief. Each has a little bit of a different purpose or application process. And I just want people to be aware of that. So I'll be having a workshop with Rich about that, as well as how that ties into our current city budget needs and the potential uses of those funds for some of the new things that we've asked for.
Yeah, I got a question. Could I ask a question, Kate?
Yeah, of course, Rich, go ahead.
Courtney, the $10 million, that's a one-shot infusion, correct?
Correct.
And
It's a multi-year one-shot infusion.
it's over 2 years, okay.
Yeah,
and
2.5, yeah.
2.5. And what we're trying to do is to equate, I'm assuming we're trying to equate what's already in our budget with what some of the provisions or thoughts that are in this $10 million that we've already come up with that we can use, correct?
Correct. Now, the goal is so the guidance from the state is not to supplant operations and to fit within those like required points that Kevin just made for learning loss, decelerate learning loss and address social emotional needs and
Okay.
digital learning.
All right.
But yes, the point is, yes. So the thing that we have to assess is the risk for the future. So a lot of the things that we put forward in the plan from the city are personnel related. And so to the extent that we do decide to shift those items into that grant, we run the risk in future years of losing those people or that funding.
Okay. So what's the risk of us utilizing the $10 million and creating programs or paying for improvements, et cetera, and then down the road, what do we do at the end of the 2 years? Pull a plug on we just pull a plug on what we've already spent the $10 million for?
I mean, I would stay hopeful that because it's this is just me speaking, I'm not speaking for the district, but it's a nationwide effort that it would continue to be sustained in some way. But yes, we can't count on that. It's not in any budget. It's only appropriated up till 2022, and so it is a risk that we run. But it's a risk shared by the rest of the country with the investments that they're making.
Thank you.
And it's part of the reason why the acceleration of the alliance monies, they maintain the original numbers that they were going to, because Danbury was expecting an acceleration in those in the alliance monies. And I know the governor had mentioned recently that they may pause on that acceleration. And if they maintain those numbers, I think the cliff that we're concerned about right now, we would be less concerned about, right, Courtney? And I think that was some thoughts that you had previously.
Yeah, yes, so we definitely need the state to at the very least, maintain the commitment to the alliance levels in the 2 years down the road. But in addition, I just want to say, so Dr. Sal's stand on this is that we both need the $14 million for what we put forward for operations, and we need the 10.1 to mitigate learning loss. I mean, that's his position. So, and we also have to prudently plan for if the contingencies, the what ifs. So the what if one is we get less than we ask for from the city. The second is what if the alliance funding remains flat. We have to be prepared for all of those contingencies. And so I'm prepared to talk to the board about that, through you, Rich, and the finance committees as well.
I'm not as hopeful down the road that this is a continuation. I sort of look at it, worst case scenario, or even I think what'll happen, it's a shot in the arm, and then a couple of 3 years when maybe the virus thing is under control and it becomes a normal flu shot every year, that we're stuck with programs and we pull a plug on it, and then we're scratching our head and say, sorry, we can't afford it anymore. We could air condition all of our buildings and use the $10 million. That'll be something. But
yeah, so every piece of what each group is examining when they go through, they're very carefully thinking through things that are, I'm not going to say one time in nature, things that give us long-term impact and would not leave, you know, if for example, there's a train the trainer model for social emotional that's expensive, but we get a big bang for our buck with our current staff, and we could retain some of that, you know, and it's for social emotional, and it's pretty, it's a really well-known model that we've wanted to implement and we haven't implemented. Now might be the time. That's one of the things that's being put forward as an example. You know, buying libraries for our kids, it's mitigating learning loss. You know, it is put forward in our budget. So yeah, just Rich, people are definitely mindful of that. We're not hoping, but to your point earlier, most of our budget asks were personnel. So you know, you can't have it both ways.
I wanted to ask a question about that, Courtney, because on one of the slides, I think it was the second to last slide, there was like a last line that says it could be used towards, you know, additional staff. Are we talking, you know, so when we talk about supplanting operations, we're talking about not using that money for the existing staff that we have, but any new staff that we might bring in that are specific to these goals, we might be able to fit under this umbrella. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I do think that just like we did last year, you know, it's still part of our operational budget, it's part of our operational budget needs, but and when the city comes back with the response about the funding, we can look at that and yes, some of the things that we put forward would be eligible. We would have to figure out with the unions, like it's described, how that would work if they're grant and termed positions, for example. But the counselors, the student support specialists, certainly a lot of the curricular investments, you know, could be considered mitigating learning loss.
Okay. So we're going to have to figure out, I think, how to navigate that conversation at the city council level, you know, which I can certainly appreciate, you know, the different interests that are being represented, you know, by the city. But I think, you know, I kind of concur with Dr. Sal's point that we need both sets of funds to come in, you know, just from the presentation we had from Dan and Megan at the last meeting and hearing that they had, you know, programs that they put in place specifically to address some of the things that were happening, you know, some, you know, problems that they saw happening at the high school level and then had to cut them.
Yeah.
And I just don't want us to wind up back in that place because, you know, that's not doing our work to provide the best possible educational experience for our kids.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like when we get on the other side, I'm sorry, Ms. Cooper, did you want to say something? Okay.
No, I know that this is not a finance meeting, but, you know, the committee sort of go hand in hand. And that was my question, you know, as far as looking at the $10.1 million and knowing that we are asking for, what is 13 million or 14 million, whichever the number that we're using. As we approach the community and the common council, you know, first thing that they would say, well, you have 10 million. So why are you asking for 13 million? And I know that this is coming off a grant and, you know, there's specific things that you will be able to do with these funds. But again, would you, and I think Courtney has said it earlier, that, you know, we will move forward and ask, you know, with the 10.1 million, then we will also continue to ask for the 13 million from the city. And I guess I'm just trying to figure out, you know, is this going to be you know, I'm just trying to get some thought as to how you feel about that.
For me, one of the challenges is that it is a challenging year. So I understand that for the city, and I know that our ask is higher than anybody in Connecticut. One of the challenging things is that, and this is my opinion, every year that we don't put the funding out forward, we're stepping backwards. So 2 years from now, and this funding goes away, and I don't know how to play that politically, Gladys. So I'm just, or with the community or what's palatable. But I do think that every year that we don't invest, we're further back in the hole because just the cost of living, if it goes up 2.5% every year, for us, 2.5% is a lot of money, you know, because we're a big district. So 3 years from now, if we don't get our 2.5 every year, then we're 7.5% behind. And, you know, so it's keeping pace with the local commitment. and we have to do that rational understanding of where the city is right now with the pandemic and the loss of revenue. But that would be what I would say. So I don't have the answer. I think so Kevin, can you answer
Yeah,
that?
so I will say, and Courtney, my thoughts, quite frankly, are connected to a statement that you made earlier when you talked about, you're really hopeful that the state maintains, those funding levels that they had committed to previously. And I feel like, if we can begin to think through I think a 3 to 4 year budget is necessary now more than ever. And I feel like it's going to be necessary for us to partner with the city to talk about what our needs are, and not just this year, but 2022, 2023, because when these grants sunset, we can't be back at ground zero again. When we get to the other side of this, obviously we just talked about the many activities that are eligible under this grant, and we will address them. I'm confident we will do right by kids and families with that work. But when the grant sunsets, right, we need, obviously we need the state to continue to maintain their funding levels. But I think we also need to work and partner with the city, and hopefully that they will also maintain the levels we need them to be at the end of these 3 years, not just this year, but when that grant ends, we need some type of commitment from the city to say, when we get to the other side of this, right? Because we have a little jump start over these next couple of years. But when we get to the other side and all of that money is gone, we can't be back to where we are right now. We have to be in a different space in terms of a commitment from the city. And I'm hopeful that these next couple of years gives the city the opportunity to grow, and get the support that they need to help refresh. Because I quite frankly, I don't pay attention to that side of the ledger in terms of what the city dynamics. But we will need some type of assurances when this is over, given the continued growth in our community, given the growth in our schools, we're going to need a support that's different from the support that we have right now. And it can't just be enough to maintain the additional staffing. It needs to be enough to maintain the staffing plus the investments we've made over these last couple of years.
Yeah.
And I think that needs to be part of our planning effort. And I think we need to start partnering with the city like ASAP. I know the state, we need them to maintain their commitments, but I think some partnering and conversations need to take place with the city as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Courtney and Mr. Walsh.
Okay.
Go ahead, Rich.
Kevin, I like your point in saying that we're going to partner with the city. This is very complex, and it's complex, and it creates a burden for us in terms of going down a road and feeling assured that we could follow through with our commitments. Is there a way that we could work with somebody in the city to, as we prepare this, as opposed to just giving a presentation when we normally do, which I'm sure is just too complicated for them to hear in a 1 hour or 2 hour session? So maybe it's possible that, I'm not saying who, but maybe it's possible that somebody in the city, whether it be the finance department, basically it should be I'm not saying who it should be, but somebody within the city understand what we're going through, and at least the rationale and the need for this stuff, so we're all on the same playing field, and at least they have our thought process as to what we're trying to do, to engage them early on in our process as opposed to later on. So we build a partnership, a true partnership, as opposed to just going in with a hat in our hand and say, give us, whatever funding that we're looking for.
Right.
So it might be a thought that we can reach out to them and ask them to at least stay there and understand what's happening, or have yourself or Courtney or whomever discuss with them the legalities and the issues of this money, so they understand it, and they can pass it on to their council people, so that when they have to make a decision, they don't automatically, as Mrs. Cooper said, deduct the 10 from the 13, or tell you, look, it's your problem, you got all this money now, don't come to us. But
Go ahead,
Rich,
Amy.
I just have a question. Have we ever, Richard, I'm sure you'd know the answer to this, but have we ever had a workshop at the city council meeting? You know, taking it to them? You know, take it to them instead of, you know, having one and hoping they'll get on the call or something like.
I think that's a great
You know,
idea.
And a number of years ago, or, you know, I don't want, but we had one, but I don't think the times were as complicated. You know, they were normal times where we needed money, you know, to say that. But that hasn't changed in the 14 years I've been on the board. But the last 2 years have been complicated with also with this additional funding stream that we have.
Yeah.
And now with the rug pulled out from under us regarding the alliance funding, you know, this district in a horrendous position. You know, we're guessing, we're promising a lot, and you know, can we deliver? And if we deliver, fortunately, can we continue to deliver? So, you know, somebody in the city government has to understand our plight. You know, I don't know whether it's a workshop, Amy, or whether it's a one-on-one conversation with the administration and the mayor and whomever in the finance department. But you know, my feeling is we got to build a partnership, and part of the conditions, Kevin, that you indicated, you know, in one of your slides, and I think it was toward the last, was facility upgrades. And I think a lot of that, isn't that part of the city's responsibility to take care of their buildings, or does that come under our responsibilities?
Technically, I believe it's the city's responsibility.
Yeah. So, but anyway, it's complicated. These are all our kids in the city. They're not the Board of Ed's kids. You know, they're the Danbury kids, and the city of Danbury, you know, which is basically us, has to be has to help us understand this plight that we have into fulfilling an obligation, and we've got to be able to understand what we can do.
If I can just, I just wanted to follow up on something that Amy had mentioned earlier. Amy, once you brought that up, I couldn't help but think about a sites and facilities meeting we had. It feels like centuries ago, when we were sitting down with legislators, when we were sitting down with city council members. You know, Mayor Mark was at the head of the table, and all of us were sitting there, and you know, we were partnered in that discussion. And at that time, that was about trying to launch the work of the matrix. But in many ways, it was an opportunity. It was like a workshop, because we were each of those different subcommittees were speaking to each other about the progress or lack thereof, and kind of what work needed to take place in order to move the work forward. And it would be wonderful, at least in my eyes, if we can have, you know, just trying to think about that structure, if we can have similar conversations, whether that's the finance committee, you know, whether that's the community relations committee, whichever one would be appropriate, I don't know. But it would be great if we can find a way to meet with them and, you know, continue these discussions in some time of long range planning.
I agree. I think, Rich, we have a really good working relationship with the finance director, and it's helped us tremendously, you know, in terms of, you know, just everything that we've needed that's doable, we've been able to achieve with the finance director this year. And I think that us doing a presentation to the finance director, Dave St. Hilaire, he does know all of this information about ESSER and ESSER2. We share it with him. And he's influential, certainly. However, he's not the one, you know, that's making the decision. So I do think the council is a place that we could have some impact in terms of really informing people, like Amy mentioned, and maybe the finance committee, and including Dave as a partner there, because, you know, he has been a wonderful partner with us. Maybe we'd need to bring this up with the mayor and get his thoughts about who that would be, and/or about including them in the community engagement work with the ESSER2 planning as a way to get a hook, you know, to get them interested potentially. Yeah.
I think it's time that Kevin and Courtney and everybody else, I think it's time that we form a partnership here in the city, and it's not Board of Ed against the city and vice versa.
Yeah.
This is, as I keep saying, these are our kids, and the city has the same responsibility in providing, a good education for these children as we do. And as times get more and more complicated, we've got to work together to make things work rather than just adversarial. I think gone are the times we go there with our hand in our hat and say we need this, and then walk away with whatever we get, and we do magic and everything goes away, and the next day, it is something else. This stuff is not going away. The implications that we have here with the funding that we're asking for in the budget, plus all the complications that this $10 million, and who knows what's down the road may be, but all these one-shot infusions creates a problem for us. And I'm glad you like that multi-year idea, because I think that's critical. That shows everybody strategic planning on our part, and it's time to work as a team. If we don't work with the funding source, we don't work with the people that write the checks so that they understand our plight. And you're right, it may not only be with the mayor, may not only be with Dave St. Hilaire, but maybe to the full council, is to have what you call a workshop, but some sort of a presentation to them in terms of what we're faced with, so they see it firsthand. And then if time comes again this year and they allow us to do the presentation, they will be more aware of the significance of our budget rather than just listening to it for the first time and trying to absorb everything. So it may be something we want to consider.
That's a good thought, Rich. Thank you.
Could I interject a brief word or two? I think it's very important that if we're going to form a relationship with the city, I think you should not just do it once a year. And this is what has been happening over the times. We get to the budget, we sit down with them at their education committee once a year. And we have to start planning to not do that once a year. And as long as I have been on the board, there have always been some type of communication about the budget, not as much as going for a workshop of anything, but when they had put their education committee together, everybody comes to the table and we sit down, and it's only once a year. So if you're going to look at forming a partnership, let's say we start meeting every 2 months, every 3 months, or whatever. And then, because once the education committee is formed, you get those people involved, which is, I think, is about 10, 12 people. And then you can form that relationship with the Common Council and have them all come in, and then everyone have a full workshop on the budget. And I think this is, to me, the short stick of it is, we only do this once a year.
Yeah.
So if we're going to form the partnership, let's say, okay, we need to start sitting down in September or October. Okay. Then the next 2 months, and just keep pushing and pushing and pushing until we sort of get them on board with what we are trying to make them understand that we need as a district.
Yeah. Good one. Yep.
Totally agree. If we're going to partner, I totally agree. That's what it would take.
I'm just thinking about the number of meetings that we've had to try and understand the complexity of all this stuff. And we
True.
see the monthly finance
Right.
updates and understand all those mechanisms. So I have to imagine from, an outside perspective, that's a lot to absorb. And, they're weighing that against the things that they're looking at every month in terms of budgeting and expenses. So good points all around. Thank you.
Yeah, I think one thing, just when Dr. Sal briefed, and I briefed Mayor Cavo, but Dr. Sal spoke mostly on the current budget, it was really informative because it was similar to Kate's kind of highlights, and the one pager. We spoke to like 5 or 6 points. He really heard it and he understood the need, and he knows he's constrained, but it was a good opening point for him to hear. And I was surprised that he didn't know some of the information, even though he was president of the council, but now in his mayor. So, it kind of circles back to all the points that Gladys made. Just sustain the relationship, like start the relationship, sustain it, not just at those one meetings, and really look at maybe workshopping some things with them in a way that gets their interest too.
Sure.
But
I got another question.
Amy, I'm gonna take you, Rich, and then I'll take you after that, Rich.
I think that it's an opportune time also with a new, I don't know if, we don't know if it'll be Mayor Cabo or someone else, but excellent time to get into a new groove with a new leader, right? I mean, just like you said, Courtney, that you and Dr. Sal went to see Mayor Cabo and he wasn't aware of some things. So it may be a good time to do it.
yeah.
Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, we're struggling with trying to present our budget to the parents and the general public to support it. Just think of how difficult it is to present this concept to them so that the publicity that they get from, the Patch or the News Times or wherever they get their information, the headlines read, the Danbury Public Schools get, $10 million, and somebody sits back and says, again, to my point, what are you bothering me with? You're flush. So this is complicated, as we're hearing it tonight. Can you imagine the complication we're going to have in trying to get this across and if we stay with a one-pager concept, is to get this across to the general public, which says, basically, these funds are different, to be used differently than our regular general budget. If that's a way to phrase it. So it's creating, again, more of a communication problem for us to reach the outsiders, for those people to support us, to continue to have them support us, rather than to lose them because they don't understand the implications of all this money. They just hear money and, as I said, the layman will subtract one from the other and say it's home free and go on to something else.
Yeah.
But
I think part of our work here too is building awareness about the things that we're lacking in our current structure. And obviously we want to be careful about how we're presenting information and careful about how we're talking about our schools, because I don't think anybody here would disagree that our schools do a really fantastic job with the resources that we have. It's just a question of helping people understand that we don't have the resources that really are what we want to give our kids, and that parents are asking for, and that students are looking for. So that's a piece of this as well, is helping folks understand what it could look like to have a high school that has a program for gifted and talented kids, what a program would look like to have sports at the middle school level, what it would look like to be able to have expanded arts and music programs, at all levels. We have some good things in place, but, we've had to make cuts to a lot of the programs that we have and to a lot of the experiences we could offer as part of a robust education that extends just beyond the pure academic piece of this.
I think one of the things I can do is also look to other large districts that are recipients of a large amount of money that are also struggling, and find out how they're talking to their city about this. So, we can get some common language, because I know, just seeing from my CASBO group, the business officials group, they're struggling also with how to convey this message.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Also,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, this doesn't even throw into the picture the financing of the academy. I think you're gonna be as short as me in a little while.
And I think that's why it's so important to partner with the city on this, because, like I said earlier, we don't just need the state to maintain their funding levels, but we need to get the city to commit to a funding level that's going to make sense for us. When we're on the other side of these grants and they sunset, because we cannot be back at ground zero. We'll be opening up the academy at the high schools. We'll have again, increase population growth around the city. We have an annex that we know at Ellsworth that we know is going to fill up. This all requires additional staffing, across the district. And so that's just our, base staffing that we need to continue to move the district forward. Not to mention the contractual obligations That will certainly be an increase in us in our city fund in our city budget. And so, that's just enough to maintain our budget. Never mind the initiatives and the enrollment growth that we're anticipating over these next 2 or 3 years. And then the grant monies will be gone. And again, that's why it's so important to try to start to get commitments from the city and the state to maintain these things and continue to move forward.
Yeah.
And perhaps the city could help us advocate to the state to reinstate that alliance money. Again, if we act as a partnership, and so we're acting as a city and not the educational part of the city, but the city, in its entirety, in the city government plus the Board of Ed is asking the state to maintain what they've agreed to do. So I think it has merit.
So Kate, I just wanted to make you aware, while we were talking, I moved the agenda around a little bit just to make sense before we close out. I did want to give Ann an opportunity to review the community invitation that we had developed. I think the 2 surveys that I had included the links for in our agenda, it was really just for information only. We just wanted to make you aware that we had developed surveys on behalf of the district to get feedback, to elicit feedback from our staff on how they would love for us to use these funds, given the guidance that was provided. But then this similar survey that Ann had developed, Ann and her team had developed for parents, families, and community as well. And
So is that going out district-wide, just to clarify?
It is. They're both in draft form right now. Let me just put this back up. They're both in draft form right now, but yes, that is the idea. Ann, are you still there?
I'm here.
Okay. You want me to start with the community invitation and then go to the surveys? Okay.
Sure.
Now watch it not work because.
Oh, no.
You still have 79 days left in your trial, so it should.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, thank goodness. So we felt it very important that we have listening forums with our families where they have an opportunity to speak with us, but then also to have surveys. So there's modality ways that families can get information back to us. We've had several conversations already with groups in the city. Questions have come to my office. I'm sure Courtney has fielded some too about what is this money? What's this going to do for my family? And it's written up in the newspaper, and communities like ours are doing some of the same things. So next week on Tuesday and then Thursday, we will have listening forums. The first one is at March 16th. That one will be done in Spanish by our FRC through that group. And then we have 2 on Thursdays, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. Or one in the evening, and that will give parents, community members time to get there and then respond to sets of questions. I've been fortunate enough to attend a couple other districts to see how they've done it and what I like about it and what I don't like about it. I do believe that we need to give some parameters up front of what the money can be spent on and help channel people's energies, very much like what we just did here on the different areas that money can be spent on. So that is that invitation that will go out tomorrow to folks. And Kevin, if you can bring.
How about, want to do the family one, Ann?
Sure. So this is a survey, and as you read down through it, I'm sure you'll say, wow, that's just a bizarre idea. As I ran it through my team today, they're like, I don't know. But, when we're trying to build a sense of community, we wanted to throw out ideas of what families felt were important and not important. And of course, one of the big ones on here was a community garden around pollinators. Right there, you see it, a community or school-based pollinator vegetable garden. That's huge. Our experience for our 21st century programs have been huge for that, with parents, partaking in growing the vegetables and reaping them. And so how can we use that money then? Can't do food carts, but we certainly can do projects like that help feed families. And so this survey here that is both for families and community is pretty wide ranged of the things that we threw out there that we'd like to hear from feedback from them on how important it is to them, or maybe it's not important at all. And so we'll be able to take the data that we receive from this survey to be able to help direct our priorities into the grant and how that's put together. Of course, at the bottom, I did leave a section for open comments. What did we miss? What other ideas do you have from this? So this, as I said, is being discussed in the community, and we are getting questions. So I expect that it will be hopefully well filled out, and that families will feel comfortable about putting comments in the bottom portion. Wow, I didn't think it was that long, but that's okay.
I was going really slow, Anne.
Yeah, no, that's all right. What other learning supports would be helpful? What educational programs? And this particular one here, these questions here, the learning support is around what's important for the student, and then what learning programs would be helpful for the parents to enhance their learning on how to support their child's learning. And then what did we miss? Tell us what else you think. So that's that survey. And then two, like Kevin had said, we wanted to make sure that we reach out to our union members, our staff. They're the, on the ground, they're the ones that we also want to hear from, where do they find, where's the importance for them? So is it, summer school programs, credit recovery at the high school, extended day for acceleration and intervention? And so these surveys are vetted by the cabinet. They're vetted by our curriculum experts as well as to what areas the staff feel necessary. We also did, under Dr. Casimiro, a large a bit of work with our admin council, broken down into the learning loss areas and PD of what they feel are important. So we're trying to challenge this, as Courtney said, channel it, I'm sorry, as Courtney said, as quickly as possible, but by doing due diligence in the work that we're being done to capture everyone, so that when that button is hit, I think it's April 5th, the proposal has to be in. We feel that we did our best job and put our best foot forward in getting all of this information put together in a timely basis that's going to fit the needs of our community. So that's it.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Anne.
It was a very thorough list, so thank you, Dr. Mead.
Thank you. And always add more.
Well, I want to ask you guys a question about this, because I think part of what I try to think about as we're approaching anything that we talk about with the schools and how we're supporting our students is thinking about those most vulnerable kids, and the most vulnerable families that are in our community that either may not be able to offer feedback for one reason or another. We're trying to make it as accessible as possible, obviously, but some folks don't have internet or don't have the ability to access, things this way. And I'm also thinking about the different percentages of people that might respond to something like this, where some of the priorities that maybe we should have as a district kind of get outweighed by the responses that we see from this feedback here. And I'm just wondering if there's a way we can sort of address that equity piece.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we'll be doing is it'll go out through a robocall, it'll go out in the email, but we'll also be placing it into the Google Classrooms for students to bring back to their parents. We know for many of our younger students, the parents are sitting right there with them. And so we're going to ask teachers to bring it forth during their classrooms to show parents, talk to parents a little bit about it, and to get the word out that way. And I think that will, to your point, Kate, will really help gather those families that we often don't hear from, but are hearing from more. And we'll also work with our 21st century programs and the ELP program to reach families as they're coming and going, picking up their children next week, to make sure that they're aware of this and that they take the time to do the surveys.
Excellent.
And attend the forum.
And are these both available in Spanish and Portuguese?
They will be, yes.
Okay,
yes.
wonderful. Thank you so much.
For translation.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe we could also put them in our, we don't have that much time left with the 1 week distribution of the food. You know,
Oh,
in those boxes,
absolutely.
we could put
Yes,
a flyer in there.
absolutely.
Good thinking,
Absolutely.
Courtney.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you, Dr. Mead.
Thank you.
And so, Kate, last but not least from us anyway, Courtney, did you have any update on the budget timeline?
Yeah,
Or
well, I
no-
just, do you mind if I just share from, they don't last year's, just because I want us to be mindful of the time, and I just want to, I know we don't have this year. Let me find, where is this? Okay, hold on 1 second, I'm so sorry. I didn't have it ready to go. I mean, I did, but then I went out of it. Here it is, okay. Share screen. Okay. So they haven't published this year yet, but here's where we are, like in terms of like a comparable time frame. So we had our February 14th submission between the 10th to the 20th, so last year, so roughly along the same time is when they're preparing their budget for binding, meaning, you know, the finance director was working with the mayor. And then we're working towards that date of roughly, I think it's April 5th this year, because it's that Tuesday,
Okay.
when the mayor will present to city council. And then city council has basically those 3 weeks in April to review. And then the proposed budget is printed by the Danbury News Times, and it's formally adopted on May 15th. So to say we don't have much time to get out whatever message we want to get out with the community, or if we want to initiate some forum with the city council. I don't know yet. I don't know if you've heard, Kate, because Dave hasn't told me yet, or Rich, if you've heard the format that they haven't decided. I know that the executive order expires after the April deadline. So I don't know if they're going to take advantage of that again, and it'll be like last year where there's not like a formal public forum. As soon as I know, I will let the committee know, or as soon as any of us hear. But for right now, just so you're aware that this is the date, around April 5th would be the date that the mayor would be presenting to the council. And then those 3 weeks are when the council is doing its review, and we'd have our committee meetings if they're going to be held.
As well as the education subcommittee meeting.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
And we can certainly ask for that, you know, and I think have every right to ask for that traditional meeting, even if they decide that they're going to go forward, because we didn't have it last year. But that's the timeline, so. Yeah.
Thank you, Courtney. I haven't heard anything from any of the folks that I've reached out to about
Thanks, Courtney.
how that schedule is going to work. So
Yeah, I apologize that I don't have it yet. I mean, they're just mired in their current process at the moment as well. So.
And then, Kate, the last piece for us, you know, Anne has already spoken to next week the community engagement sessions around ESSER. You know, of course, you know, between city council and ESSER, both of these things have kind of jumped in front of our other engagement sessions that we wanted to participate in. But we still have plans also to present the city budget as we had initially intended. So Anne, would you mind to help close us out, at least from our perspective, kind of what our next steps are? I know we had identified some different constituency groups throughout the city of Danbury, and talk about our next steps there as well.
Right. So I changed the letter a little bit to reference the budget details that Courtney did in the presentation that's listed on our website. And for right now, that's the master kind of information that's out there from that presentation that Courtney did. Until we get a date from the city, or we really know what the city is doing, it's really hard to ask people to become active at this point, except to reach out to their council people. And so once we get that date, we'll be able to continue and circle back with all of those groups to make sure that they're you know, asking their constituents and their stakeholders to help promote this budget.
Right. And in the letter, Anne had developed a letter inviting these different constituent groups to join us for a Zoom meeting so that we can present that overview of the budget that we had talked about. And maybe it's probably best to invite them right after the ESSER engagement so folks don't get confused and think
Right.
it's the same session.
Exactly.
So, maybe we can send out those invitations next week, and then probably in a couple of, in a week or two, we can turn around and engage those folks as we had originally planned.
Correct. Correct.
In the meantime, can we also, and I don't know if we should go through you, Dr. Mead, or through you, Kevin, to set up a meeting with the Democratic Town Committee and the Republican Town Committee. I don't know if that, where that falls into the timeline. But my feeling is sooner would be better rather than later, but depends on what your guys' schedules are, so.
Well, I'm available, right? So we could just make that happen.
Okay.
But we'll have to circle in Dr. Sal and, let's talk strategy and do it as soon as possible, Kate. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Rich, you had your hand up?
Yeah, last week we had, or at some point we had talked about engaging a conversation with the students. I wasn't looking for them to advocate, for our budget or get into a legal conflict with them. It was more of an understanding that they understand what we're trying to do for them, and have them look at the components of the budget so they can give some feedback on it that'll help us to either reinforce that what we're doing is good for them, or if we could pick up more information from them that maybe we didn't have in here that we might have missed. That was the point in terms of engaging the students. With that, I assumed it would just filter home if they get excited about it and then talk to the parents about it. But basically, it'd be good to have their feedback in this as another interested party in the budget process. So that if something could be done to put something together with the whoever it is at the high school, whatever group up there that Donovan feels we can do it, and it might be interesting.
I agree. I agree, Rich. I think in similar but different way, as we got feedback from Dan and Meg, hearing firsthand of the impact of positions being available or not available, I think it would be valuable for us to hear directly from kids, to hear how they're impacted by services or lack thereof at the school. I think that would be good for us. So I'll circle back with Dan and see if we can get some kids for us to speak to.
It would be good too to build for our next year's budget as well, like to get that engagement and say we had students involved and these were their thoughts, to continue that once we build it this year.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I just want to say very nice job tonight. Excellent job. A nice agenda, fantastic. There was one of your slides in the agenda packet was a multi-slide relative to the high school that kept flipping. It confuses me because it goes too fast and I can't focus on what it is. Is there a way to play with fonts on that and reduce that to something that's manageable? Even if you extend it to not 8.5 by 11, but a legal size paper or something, if you have to do that, but it might be better on one sheet rather than have it scroll, because personally, I find it difficult to read it, comprehend it, and the next slide comes, unless I have the ability to stop.
Sure. So Rich, that I put that together and it was based on the feedback that we got from Dan and Megan, and I can adjust the fonts, I can adjust the content of the slides, I can adjust the time that those slides are up. So if you feel like, I could certainly go back and add, time to that. The idea was that this would be pushed out through social media. And the intent behind choosing that format is that, it's sort of happens in the background as somebody's like looking. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to click on anything. They don't have to increase the size on anything. It's big enough that they can read the content right
I'm
in
not-
place,
I'm
so.
not- I'm not, I'm not saying anything negative about it. It's just that my thought would be would be a good mailer or something, a good takeaway that you can have as a hard copy takeaway. You could shoot it out to, again, a PTO or a principal and tell a principal to give it to whomever, and particularly in a high school, if this is addressed as the high school. And it's, somebody could click on it and print it out. The other one, suits the purpose of what you designed it for. But it had a lot of good information on there, and it was, good bullet points. So it's just another way that we can get a message across.
Sure, I think multiple formats is great.
Yeah.
And that's something, if you guys are okay with, I can work on that, and kick something back to you. And I can do that for the other one as well, just to have it.
Okay. So Kate, that
Right.
is it for Courtney, Ann, and I, unless you have any additional items for us.
No, I just want to open the floor to the committee members and see if anybody has any other questions or feedback they want to share. I think we're set here, so I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion to adjourn.
I got a motion from Joe, and Amy, you'll take the second on that.
I'll
looks
take
like.
a second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much
for
for coming tonight.
Thank you, guys.